take us back to October 3rd, 1979. You were 17, your brother was 21. What were you like as a teen? What were your interests?
We were pretty much the same as everybody. You know, we played street hockey and soccer and did all different things, and worked hard at school. Had some, you know, interest in organizations such as like TPS and things like that, and pretty much ran normal life, you know, if you want to call it that. But we all had our cluster of friends, especially in the neighborhood. We wouldn't be surprising that, you know, we'd have a kickball game at the cul-de-sac or football game in somebody's backyard, or we had another cul-de-sac on Meakin where we'd do street hockey and things like that. Just pickup games of baseball down at Welsh Field. Different though, back then it was Dunham Field, not Welsh Park. But, you know, things of that nature. So, no, ride our bikes all the way down to, you know, Dunham Field, or pick up a pizza at First Pequannock Grinder, different things like that. Pretty much normal, you know. Go to school, come home, do your homework, and then play with your friends, you know, once everybody got together. And as soon as it got dark and the street lights came on, you'd go home. Or you got a butt whooping.
So what was the neighborhood like?
The neighborhood was pretty tight. You know, all the parents kind of knew each other. I know on my street, all our parents would, you know, stand at the yard with a rake and talk, and, you know, just congenial and nice and wave to each other. It was just a really different kind of neighborhood, because as soon as we moved in '74, it was like, you know, we have a German family next to us, so she came over and introduced herself, brought some baked, you know, pastries or a pie or something like that. And then across the street they introduced, and it was just very welcoming situation in our community.
So take us back to October 3rd. You've been in school, you left school.
Yeah, that was a half day. And plus I was out a little earlier because I worked at my dad's factory and whatnot, where he worked in Bloomfield. So basically, you know, I came home, did my homework, and then I left the house. It was probably about, I had to be to work by 3, so it was probably about 20 of 3, or, you know, somewhere around there, 2:30. And so I was driving at that time, so I was driving to Bloomfield, and of course the skies kind of got wicked dark as I was driving to work. And it was really weird. It was really murky green sky, very, very dark. Hail started pounding on the car as I was just pretty much turning into the parking lot, because it took about 15-20 minutes to get to work. And then when I got out of the car, ran into work, punched in, and then went to my dad's department. And from there, about 15-20 minutes, probably around 3:15, 3:20, my dad got a call from our friends at Windsor Locks, the Burke family, and Bob Burke's wife, actually. And he also worked with my dad in Bloomfield at the same factory at Birkin. And so at that point, she had called my dad and said, you know, I heard there was a tornado in Pequannock area and Windsor Locks. I don't know what's going on, because I've got the ham radio on. I'm listening to all this chatter on air. And you might want to call your wife and see what's going on. And so we kept trying to call for a good, probably 15 minutes, at which time my dad said, you know what, get out of here, take your brother, or actually my brother was older, so we both got in the car and tried to get home to see what was going on. And we got as far as, I think it was like Pigeon Hill Road, and the traffic was just all backed up. And so we finally waited our time, because they were diverting traffic back down Pequannock. And so we got to a certain point, and people were starting to, you know, linger by the bridge, you know, because they weren't letting any traffic. And so at that point, I told my brother, hey, let's drive to Windsor Locks. Let's loop around and go to Bob Burke's house. And So we landed there, and she was like, I don't know what's going on, and her daughters were there, and we were all just talking. And so I was like, you know what? The only way that we can get through here is, I'll do what I usually do to get to your house. I'll ride a bike. Back in the day, I would just, instead of driving, I would just ride my 10-speed, or I think back then it was a great bike was a 12-speed. So I said, can I borrow your bike and ride the bike from your house on Copper Road and get to Settler? And so as soon as I got to, like, in front of the Ramada Inn, that's when I kind of stopped pedaling a little bit and stopped, and it was weird because Dale Drug was like just about gone, and the hardware store was just about gone, from looking off to the side. And before, you couldn't see that because of all the trees, and I'm looking at it, and then the plane was flipped upside down. And you just kind of look at the total devastation. And at that point, I was like, well, there's power wires over the road. And I'm like, well, the hell with it. I'm just going, So I just kept riding the bike and kept riding it until I got to Meakin. And at that point, I'm like traveling through debris, trying to get through different things. And so I think it was right at the corner of Sermola's house, I actually, no, I kept riding all the way down and got to Pioneer. And at Pioneer, I just couldn't ride the bike anymore. So I basically just laid it down and started walking down around the corner, and then got down to Settler. And what was weird is that when you're standing at that point, growing up, you'd never think that that was a high point of terrain. And so I'm looking out, and I can see the church from there. And I can see all the way to, where Pequannock Grinder is, because it's just totally clear. There's no trees. And so at that point, I started walking down Settler and down Pioneer, basically, and the Spatafor kids came up to me and were like, have you seen my mom? Have you seen my mom? I said, I would check your house. Well, my house isn't here, And so I said, well, check a house that is here. And right now I have to find where my house is. And basically there's debris scattered all over. So I continued down Pioneer, went down Settler, at which time I saw cars flipped over, both sides, trees, mattresses in the trees. It's still a little murky, and the sun was just starting to come out. And so I kept walking, and I didn't really see anybody else that I knew down on my street, which was odd. But I got in front of my house, and I'm looking at the second floor of the house, just teetering inside the foundation. And so I'm looking around, and I'm seeing some of our stuff, but all the trees, which were very mature pines on the north side of the house, were completely gone, all snapped off. I saw my dad's station wagon up against the house next door on the northern side. And at that point, I was like, you call out Mom, but really, that seemed more of an impulse at that point, like a natural impulse where you start looking around. And at that point, I was like probably in shock. But I walked back up, and I saw the Miss Slaheka, and she lived across from us, but more northern, next to the Alfieris. And I said, have you seen my mom? And she's like, oh, your mom left. I said, she did, because when I left the house, she was sick, and she was upstairs in bed, so she just wasn't feeling good that day. I said, that's odd, because I left her at about 2:30, and she's like, no, I saw her leave. And so I was like, okay. So I figured everything's all set, and so I walked back up, got on the bike, and pedaled all the way back to Windsor Locks. And at that point, we didn't have cell phones, so I called my dad and I said, somebody said that, you know, she drove away. And then my dad reminded me, well, that's not possible because you had her car. And I'm like, that's probably the situation. So from there, it just started to be a situation where, you know, the Burke family said, well, why don't you stay here until your dad gets back? Because I'm going to tell him to come, you know. And so from there was basically just a waiting game, you know, for about a day and a half. And I went to work the next day, and instead of going to school, and so kind of hung out with Dad, because it was kind of like a, you know, where else are we going to be? You know, you don't have a home. And what was nice is, you know, Mrs. Burke, Pat, she took all my clothes when I went to bed and washed them, so I had a clean set of clothes the next day to go to work in. And then at that point, my dad's boss, it was, yeah, I think either the next day or the day after or something, he called me into his office and said, you know, at that time I didn't know that my dad had left because I was down testing parts and stuff. And he's like, you know, sit down for a minute. I want to talk to you. He says, you know, times like this make you a richer, smarter person, hopefully. You can go two ways. You can either let it affect you and affect your family and affect your personal life, or you can wrap your arms around it, decipher it, don't read too far into it, make your adjustments, and move forward and help your family. So I was kind of caught off guard with all the conversation because I didn't know what he was talking about, you know, at that point, until, you know, my dad called on the shop phone and said, hey, you need to come home, come over to the Burke's house. And at that point, that's when he told me that my mom had passed. So that's kind of the day and a day and a half of that situation. You know, which my family's been pretty private about it, so.
So how did people try to help? Friends, neighbors, the Burkes, obviously.
The Burkes were huge, providing shelter. And then my dad, his boss, owned or was part owners of Howard Johnson's in Windsor Locks, or he had a good business association with Howard Johnson. So at that point, he put us up there. And being the great person that he was, he paid the bill. We were there for about a month until the trailers came in. And, you know, those kinds of people really pitched in. And then, you know, once we really had finalized, you know, burying my mom and so on, it was trying to get to that next step, you know. And so my dad was kind of like, do I rebuild the house or do I move? And we always moved every 4 to 5 years for various reasons, whether he changed jobs or, you know, they wanted to move to a newer, bigger house. Back then, that's what you did. You moved up slowly. At that point, my dad said, well, she said this was her last house. This was the house that she always wanted. They furnished it the way they wanted it. And here it is 4 or 5 years later, and she took everything with her. And that was his mentality on it. He's like, so because this is what she wanted, that's what I wanted too, so I'm going to rebuild. And I think because the neighbors were so, you know, thoughtful, and we all talked, you know, as we're going through remains, you know, there wasn't a single time that there weren't other neighbors coming over to help or to, you know, say, what are your plans, Ed? Are you going to rebuild? They were very interested. And so when he said that he was going to rebuild, they were all very happy. And, you know, because that kept the community together. What was interesting though is how many volunteers were in the actual brook area. It was like a giant chain, you know, of people pulling debris out, pulling goods out. In our case, not only our you know, home goods didn't go that direction, it went north and northwest and up towards, we got, you know, our checkbook back, I think it's from New Hampshire. We had materials returned to us with our address from Maine. It was pretty weird, and that kept happening for about 5 or 6 years afterwards, after the storm hit, that my dad would all of a sudden get a piece of mail or a manila envelope that said, oh, found this in my yard, thought you'd want to have it. And so that was kind of weird, you know, to have all of a sudden you're getting past a few things, and then all of a sudden something shows up in the mail, you know. That's kind of weird, you know. And then the other thing is when you're, oh, I lost my train of thought.
Well, maybe talk a little bit about rebuilding the house. You were
Okay.
telling me about the plantings. You were telling me about the chimney.
Oh yeah, yeah. My dad, when he rebuilt the house, my father had hired a mason to build another fireplace in the family room before the storm hit. And so these two big guys, very sizable men, came out and gave my dad a quote for that chimney. They had it built the way my mother wanted it and he wanted it, and so on and so forth. And so after the storm, he called them back and said, you know, you did such a great job on this chimney. I want you to build the chimneys for my new home. And they were like very compassionate about it, like, we'll be there right there. And so they're on the side of the house facing where the storm was coming up from the south. And my dad said, you know, I don't want the chimney to be, you know, one side short and one side up, all the way up. He's like, it has to tell a story here for the future. And he goes, where are you going with this? He's like, well, I want 2 short sides and I want 1 middle going all the way up. He goes, I can do that. Whatever you want, Ed. He goes, good, because that means I'm giving the finger to the next storm that wants to come through here. Forget about it. You're not hitting this house. So that was kind of his little penance, I guess, to the storm, flipping off the storm if it's going to come back. And then he did other things. We were going to have another garage put on the house, and the carpenters were supposed to build that garage basically that weekend, or the very coming week. That Monday they were supposed to start excavating an additional garage. And so we had contractor after contractor knocking on my dad's door saying, we'll rebuild your home. And at that time we had contractors all over New England coming into this area to build homes. And so we were at dinner, because we didn't have a kitchen. We were at dinner one time, and it was just the 3 of us. And so I think it was my brother that spoke up and said, Dad, why don't you call the contractors that you were so picky about to build a garage? Why don't you have them come build the house? And I spoke up and said, why haven't they called you? And so my dad called them, Bill Gazzo and Brian Carpenter, and said, you know, how come you guys haven't called me about building my garage? And they said, well, I think you need more than a garage, Ed. He goes, exactly. The job just got bigger. But how come you haven't called me? He says, well, I've already ripped up that contract. So you're contract free. And so my dad says, well, you best get out here and let's write a new contract for this home that I want to build. And so they both came out and talked about it, and they looked my dad straight in the eye. We did not want to be those contractors that, oh, this is an opportunity to build a new home. He's like, no, that's not us. If you want us to build this home, we want to do it the way you want it done and the way your wife would have wanted it done. And so at that time, they'd already met my mom and stuff with the garage. So it was kind of nice that they really did a lot of things that were outstanding in a home. And today I get to live in it, you know. But those kinds of individuals were awesome, you know, that said, this is what it's going to cost, and we're not inflating the price, you know, because there was a lot of bad contractors out there that were sadly, you know, ripping other people off, you know, sadly. What's next?
Well, you were in a trailer. Tell us about what that was like as you were building your home.
Right. We were fortunate enough to be the first trailer, and that was thanks to Ella. As far as bringing in the trailers for all the families, they had a small celebration of bringing in the trailers where they had like a parade, which was surprising. But it allowed us to somewhat become halfway normal, in the sense that now I wasn't living in a hotel room. I was at least in the yard of our home, and we could watch the progress of the home being rebuilt and the yard being rescaped. And with those trailers, you know, we could have kitchen cabinets with our own food. I could go to school, park the car. You know, it wasn't normal, but at least it was some sort of normal that gets you past some other difficult situations. It's weird, but on the other side of the coin, it was great because, you know, we were coming upon Christmas time when those trailers were start being delivered. And so we celebrated Christmas in the trailer. You know, my dad went out and bought Christmas lights and said, here, you decorate the house every year, decorate the trailer. So I was putting Christmas lights on a trailer. And I think somebody asked and said, you know, I don't think the fire marshal will allow that because it's a model metal-like trailer. And somebody else said, I don't think he's going to have a problem with it, you know. And with that, as we came closer to Christmas time, then all of a sudden there was Santa Claus and people dressed up in reindeer outfits and snowman outfits. And I don't know who donated them, but somebody donated Christmas trees to everybody that has a trailer so that it could be somewhat festive, like you would normally have in a normal home situation. The trailers also allowed me to do shopping for the house, you know, actually do shopping for the family because of the fact that, you know, we lived in a hotel room. So with the bank situation and the insurance situation, it's hard living in a hotel because you don't have any security. So you're always carrying everything with you. And we went out and bought, you know, a couple of outfits so we could kind of get back to normal. Then we'd drive back to the Burke family and she would wash our laundry for us. So that way there we could do that. The trailers allowed us to do some more shopping. And there was stores like JCPenney, Macy's, a lot of these different stores that gave in-kind donations of gift certificates so that we could, or actually like line of credit, you know, no charge to the families where we could go and buy towels. We could go and buy clothes and so on and so forth. So we could get all these amenities back, which you don't have. So we may have had a trailer, but we didn't have anything to put in the trailer. And thankfully it came with a bed in the bedroom, and it came with a couch and a chair and a kitchen table and 4 chairs, and it came with a lot of the basics. But the other basics, you know, you got to go out and buy them. And so I was pretty handy as a kid, and I did some shopping, but now I was going shopping for the 3 of us. you know, because I'm the youngest. So I guess it all falls on me. Fortunately, I had some great friends that were like, no problem, let's go shopping. I had one of my best friends, Bruce Eisner. He's like, shopping? I'm there, let's go. So we went and, you know, got pots and pans and all the things for a home. And thankfully, to people like him, I wouldn't have known. He was like, yeah, you need this. Oh, yeah. Hey, don't forget the grapefruit peeler, you know. You need one of those, so on and so forth. That things that you would normally reach for that just don't exist anymore, you know, including my car. You know, so my dad had a 48 Lincoln Continental, that was gone. His brand new station wagon, that was gone. My car, it was gone. So it was weird. So you're kind of starting all over, you know. And with the trailers, it allowed us to basically get back to where we sit down at dinner time and we can talk things out, you know. And my dad was a pretty strong guy. People reached out, well, your son might need counseling. Nope, we got this. And after 40 years, well, almost 40 years, you know, it's hard and it never goes away.
Talk a little bit about school, and you talked about your best friend who just like, it's the new normal and it's my friend.
Yep.
But talk about the teachers and some of the things that.
Yeah, the school environment, and I didn't think twice about it, but I had missed a lot of school for obvious reasons, in the sense that, you know, you don't have a home, you're living out of town, you know, we're sharing a car, and my dad's boss actually gave my brother the company car so that he could go back and forth to school at that point. Because with saving books at banks, if you don't have the savings book, you can't access your money. So that's a problem. So until, you know, my dad spoke to Ella Grasso and Bob Taravella was our point of contact with her. So my dad started writing down lists of things that were problems. And so he was a huge asset to my family overall. But with school, the teachers, when I finally did go back to school, the teachers were very quiet. Very, very quiet, in the sense that, and I didn't realize it at the time, but how do you react to somebody? You know, he walks into your classroom. And I figured, okay, I'm back to school. You know, I go to the teacher and I say, okay, what work do I need to make up after a month of not being here? And they were like, don't worry about it. I said, but I need grades. And we'll go along. If you need extra help, then I'll have you come in and stay extra help. And I was like, okay. And I had a couple of teachers that really reached out. And they were like, you know, yep, it's not so much I want you to make up all the work, I want you to understand the work that you missed. So I just want you to stay after school a couple of times a week. So I did that. And then with, at the very beginning, because I'd missed a lot of time and my best friend, Bruce, had missed a lot of time, one of the vice principals got really upset and basically said, you know, Bruce has to get back to school. He can't be, you know, doing this. And then the vice principal called my dad up and said, you know, Tom has missed a lot of school. He's in danger of not graduating this year, because it was my senior year. And so my dad instantly said, really? Okay, I'll take care of this, and hung up the phone on him. And So my dad called Bob Taravella. Just one of those short times that I was actually sitting there within earshot, and my dad called Bob and said, Bob, this was the phone call I just had. This is the name of my son's best friend. This is, what's going on. Can you tell me how I'm supposed to handle this? And so Bob called Ella. Ella called the vice principal. And then next thing you know, the vice principal called my dad back and said, I apologize. And I'm really sorry. And that was not professional of me or compassionate of me. And my dad basically said, I understand you got to do your job, but that was the wrong way to do it, plain and simple. But it was just like another hurdle that you had to go through on top of insurance hurdles. I wasn't really involved in it because, let's face it, I was a senior in high school. But at that time, when the tornado hit and just afterwards, insurance companies, if you didn't have the insurance binder to show them that you had their insurance and that you are you, then they wouldn't pay on that insurance policy. And so what happened is my dad had to call Bob Taravella again and say, this is the problem. I think this was the point where, if I remember correctly, my dad was talking to Ella, and there's a picture in the newspaper of it, where they were in the backyard of the house. And I believe that was the time when she said, Ed, is there anything I can do for you? He's like, I'm just concerned about how insurance is going to pay for this. And 2 weeks later, life insurance, same thing. So how's he going to bury my mom? How's he going to rebuild a house? How's he going to pay for things? No bank books, no insurance binders, because everything was gone. So your hands are tied behind their back with the frustration. And surprisingly, my dad never showed that. But thanks to him communicating to Ella and Bob Taravella, they really grabbed everything, notified the insurance commissioner, and got the insurance company to release funds right away. And I remember Ella telling my dad, no, they are going to pay. Obviously, you cannot find your insurance binders. You couldn't find your house, couldn't find your wife. But those were some difficult hurdles that, thanks to Ella and big thanks to Bob Taravella, is having a big ear and always writing things down and coordinating efforts and really just trying to make things a little easier.
And who was Bob Taravella? What?
He was, I believe, either the president or vice president of Northern Connecticut Bank and Trust, which used to be in a building where Ruby Tuesdays is today on 75. Because I remember going to that building in order to drop off paperwork or get paperwork from my dad at that point. But so I believe Ella and Bob Taravella grew up together, so she had a huge trust in him, I believe. And the Taravella family in Windsor Locks has been awesome. Very nice family overall.
Were there ways in which the town of Windsor tried to help you and other families?
Yeah, the town of Windsor was unbelievable when they really started to. I don't think anybody can prepare, or any town can truly prepare for what happened in their own yard. Not only are you looking at, the family situation, but the road work devastation and bringing in equipment to clean off the roads, and then setting up Epequonic School, there was a lot of things. I remember going to a trailer at Pequannock School. I'm trying to remember why I had to go there. I went there a lot of times, but there was a couple of definitive times that were like, yeah, you got to go to the trailer in order to pick up paperwork for your small business SBA loan for your home and all kinds of different things. They were very active in trying to get everybody settled back in, you know, not only from a cleanup standpoint, but reaching out and trying to, because you can't understand it, the only way you can try to understand it is to talk to a lot of people that are affected by it. And some people were willing to talk about it, and some people weren't willing to talk about it. And not willing to talk about it is my dad. Pretty much. You know, his thought was, okay, you know, all this has to be done. You know, I saw him sitting at the table writing down notes. You know, it was a lot. It was a lot. And the town did a lot of coordinating with groups to clean up, coordinated with police to try to protect the area. And I'm trying to think of, there was some key areas where they really like anything as far as the rebuilding of the house, they were just super, you know. Oh, you're using this guy, no problem. And it was like they go down, they submit the plans, yep. You know, no 30 days, 90 days like back then. Everything was like, oh, okay, yep, go, just go, get going, you know. And from that aspect was awesome, you know. When you have people like Lonnie Pelton with his equipment just coming in and clearing out material. And I know he was very involved with moving trees out of the way to find my mom. And there was just so many people, you know. There was fire guys, volunteer fire people, police, didn't matter. They were all there to try to find my mom, but they were all there to try to straighten out a difficult situation. I wasn't involved as much as I wanted to, but I think my dad had his reasons.
I think he was trying to shelter his two boys from
Yeah, I think there was a huge amount of protection bubble going on that. You know what? Especially with me, because he knows I was already there. As in my father's terms, I was already at ground zero, if you want to call it that, you know, where anybody, any child, any adult that was walking around during that time or was affected being in the basement at that time, I can't say scarred for life, but really you are. That's a vivid image that never goes away. And
for you, what were some of the things that helped you get through every day?
friends, neighbors, you know. And, you know, thankfully a tough father, you know, in the sense that he was a driver. You know, get on the bus or get out. And that type of mentality back in those days was, a lot of people had that. You know, a lot of people had that attitude of, okay, you know, let's do this, let's get it done, let's be strong, and yup, it's okay to cry about it, it's okay to worry about it, but you gotta stay focused, and you gotta keep driving. So he still expected good grades, And, you know, as the house was being worked on, he said, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, but we got a lot of woodwork to sand. So we got to sand all the woodwork. We got to stand all the woodwork. We got to get all this stuff done so that Billy and Brian can hang it, and so on and so forth, different aspects of the house. So we were pretty handy before, but those types of things, we're all three working together in hindsight. We're all three working together in a home being rebuilt with nothing in it. And the only thing that I could think of is having a party every 2 weeks with all my friends in the empty house, and, which we did, you know, and surprisingly, my dad let me do that. You know, he's like, you know, all these guys are always here for you, so go ahead, whatever. So there was a lot of parties in that empty house, which was nice. Kind of gets you through a lot of difficult times. But we, you know, you just got to keep working together and staying focused. And now I've lost my focus.
Well, let's talk about some of the memorials. There was a memorial tree planted at Pequannock School. Your daughter has done a memorial to her grandmother.
Yeah, my daughter did a college, and hopefully I can find all those prints, or wherever she has placed them in the home. But she did a memorial in college because she went to school for photography. And so with that, she did a lot of the trek of the storm, how it affected our neighborhood and also how it affected the airport. And there was a lot of different types of memorial after the storm. They did, I think, a 5-year down at Dunham Field, which was like a party or a park type situation, which my father did not partake in. I was surprised at that, but he was like, no, everybody does their own thing. I don't see it being festive in his eyes, so he just wished everybody well and said, no, thank you. But
Did you go?
no, I didn't. I didn't, because at that point, you know, you didn't want to disrespect your father. You know, you got to show him that all his hard work and still being with him. You know, so it's just the way it kind of rolled at that time. I didn't want to be bad. But I know a lot of people had a good time, and realistically, that was the best thing for the neighborhood, because on the other side of the coin, the part that my dad wasn't looking at, because we weren't really active in it, is all of those people from the neighborhood work so damn hard every day, you know, and to not have a party to celebrate, hey, you know what, we got past this. We got through this. We've planted trees in the neighborhood. We've, you know, got lawns on our properties again. And now our homes are built after 5 years. You know, it was really good, proper timing in hindsight. At the time, you know, we couldn't see it. But though, here's a father that comes up with a slogan, Pequannock puts the wind in Windsor. And he has bumper stickers made up. I had my brother make bumper stickers. So he had it on the back of his car. Pequannock puts the wind in Windsor. I don't know how that all levies, but it is what it is, as they say. You know, so where's that balance? It was his own humor. So be it.
Well, looking back 40 years, how were you shaped by this? It's a huge question, maybe not a fair question, but...
It's a cumbersome question. Because the aspect of, you know, in hindsight, you know, you have a parent that's never there for high school, you know, marriages, grandchildren. You can go on those aspects. But then also, you know, every time there's a storm, my kid's grown up growing up, unlike a lot of people today that have huge warnings about storms and Mother Nature, I was taking my kids to the basement every single bad storm. Every single time I see dark gray clouds or brown greenish clouds, or there's a warning today, I still go to the basement. And now, you know, my daughter lives in St. Louis, and the past few weeks, they've had a lot of tornadoes. And so she's been grabbing her cat and dog and going down into her basement. And I didn't find out about that until I got a phone call. And she's like, yep, me and, you know, Gyra and Chica have been in the basement the past 3 nights, sleeping down there because it's been horrible, just in case. So I don't see a lot of people doing that in their normal everyday lives. I still see a lot of people where they'll have a tornado warning, and you still see on TV that cars are in the news, still driving by. They have the mobile news van, and they're still driving, and they're in the mobile news van, and supposedly they're there when there's going to be a tornado. Why? I haven't the slightest idea. The act of inhumanity? I don't know. But, so there's times like that that you're always doing weird things to other people call weird. You know, whenever there's a bad storm, you know, you're always doing the extra because you don't want to go through it again. You know, I feel bad for the people down in the southern part of the state. I just saw on the news where they're still waiting for insurance. And this is over a year. And this is how aggressive El Grasso was. Within 90 days, we were, you know, starting to get everything back together again. You know, those were the times when, you know, the insurance was cutting checks, and, you know, it took a while, but it didn't take over a year. That's horrible. Horrible for families to deal with that. But
So in terms of the neighborhood, you're still there. How did this shape the neighborhood, and are others that were affected by the tornado still close and around?
well, I don't see that, you know, there's been a lot of changes in the neighborhood. A lot of people have moved away in the last 40 years. On my street, in the last 3 years, there's only probably 8 houses on the street. And now there's Joe Alfieri across the street from me. He is the longest tenant of Settler Circle, if you want to call it that. And I'm second. And it's only because I didn't live there before. I kind of acquired it. But 2 or 3 years ago, there was 2 or 3 other ladies that were still living there. So of 8 houses, 4 of them were still original owners of those houses when they were new. And there's still a lot of other people in the neighborhood that are still original tenants, or the next generation that have come over and taken over those homes, or purchased them from their parents. But I don't know of anybody that I know of that you can walk up to anybody in the neighborhood that has been in that neighborhood at that time, and they're either going to be willing to speak to you about the tornado, or they'll be like Joe across the street. They'll be like, I have so many pictures, I have so much stuff, but I keep it in the garage away from my home because that's in the past and it wasn't a good time, and I don't even want to look at it. I don't want to talk about it. You know? And up to now, I've never been willing to really talk about it. So sometimes you got to grow up.
And be the voice of your family.
and be a face. You know, my family's been very quiet about it. Don't know why. Probably just you really need to focus tremendously as a family unit. And if you really focus as a family unit and you stay together, then it's like a nucleus of a neutron. You just can't permeate it. You just keep it together. And that's what keeps you together. And now, since I'm the only living of the three amigos, as I say, I figure it's a good time to at least speak about what we had to go through. Some of the things, I mean, it's immense. I should really retire instead of somewhat retire and really just sit down and write a book. But there's an awful lot of data that I'd probably be missing because the other two would have so much to add that I wasn't privy to being a senior in high school. But I did try to help put the nuts and bolts together and support and do whatever I could to increase morale and hopefully keep some of the doors open for people to come in. It's not always easy, but we all find a way. We all have life tragedies in some way, shape, or form, but it really depends on how much you focus on getting by it and still respecting it. I think that's probably the important aspect.
Is there anything that I've not thought to ask that could lend people some understanding?
The old adage, if you haven't walked in my shoes, you'd never truly know. I'm probably missing out verbalizing on a ton, maybe even 3 ton. But for every day afterwards that you get up, you're in a hotel room. You get up, you're in your friend's home, which is totally different and weird. And basically all you have is the clothes on your back. You don't have access to money, so you're poor. You don't have money, you have the clothes on your back, and really you're relying on great friends, and then you're relying on, the government to jump in and to help you and assist you to get back to normal. There's a lot of baby steps in between, and there's a lot of big steps in between. And every big step, you develop an understanding of what you've just accomplished. And for every accomplishment, you feel thankful because of where you were. I mean, at that point, you're not even looking at where you were before. You're just looking to get back to normal. But you never get back to normal because you're missing a key individual. A mom is a key individual. If it isn't for her carrying you for 9 months, you wouldn't exist. Plain and simple. And she always had active roles in our lives, very active. So even though you're making baby steps and big steps, there's still a huge piece missing. And all the things in the world don't make up for that.
We've talked about your mom, but we haven't talked about who she was. You want to talk a little bit about who she was?
She was, from what I remember being a kid, she was another driver. Spicy, but big-hearted, arts and crafts, sit down and do needlepoint, crochet. Somebody's having a baby, she'd crochet a blanket. You know, growing up, she'd crochet hats. You know, we never went to the store for anything, for winter mittens and stuff when we were a kid. She made all the mittens, she made all the hats. She made it for friends too because they loved them. And never asked a dime, just did it, you know, because that's what they did back then. And she was always, you know, back then my dad worked 1 or 2 jobs growing up. She was always there because she was an at-home mom. When we got to teenager status, then she was like, well, I'm going to get a part-time job. So she was working at Best Cleaners, working part-time where she got to, you know, meet all the policemen because all the policemen brought their dry cleaning in to Best Cleaners. And so she got to know all the police. And I think that was convenient to her because of the fact that if, not my brother so much, but if I got into any trouble, she would hear about it, or she would know which officer it was, you know. Or if she was like, oh, I want to know where my son is, she already knew the officer in that region and would ask, you know. But so she did a lot of gardening, a lot of baking, a lot of cooking, makes a lot of different things, Christmas ornaments for the Christmas tree. There was, at that time in the house, a lot of that material was stored in the basement. And so I was able to recover 1 box of painted, and this is weird, but me and my brother and her and my dad, more my mom than my dad, we painted all these. And so what my dad did is he put like a urethane over them after we were done. That's as far as he went with that. But that box was still in the basement. But all the other Christmas, gone. Why that box? I don't know. And to this day, I put them on my Christmas tree. You know, very bizarre because certain things were taken out of the basement and gone, and certain things were left in the basement. Very weird. You know, things that, you know, hit a hard spot, you know. But she was pretty genuine. She still kept to herself, but she was the one that was the whip come homework time. Get home from school, do your homework, then you can go outside. And that was the rule. When I brought my kids up, same thing. Tradition, I guess. And that's probably the other aspect of the whole storm situation is what you had for traditions, you had to make new ones. Because no matter how hard you try, it's not the same.
Jenny, do you have any questions for Tom?
No.
I actually don't, because every time I had a question, you talked about it, so I don't.
You mean I read your mind?
I guess. No, I don't have any questions. I really thank you for coming in and talking. This couldn't have been easy.
40 years, pent it up.
40 years.
I was telling you, I was working in my yard this weekend, and one of the things that when Marissa was doing her project for school, for college, I said to her, I said, you can go out in this yard, you can dig anywhere you want, and you will find something from my home, from your old home. And she's like, no way. I said, go ahead. So she photographed me digging a hole, random, anywhere. Dig a hole, tile piece. Dig a hole. Yesterday, digging a hole for some posts around my pool equipment. Wife wants it fenced in a little bit nicer. Like, okay. Started digging a hole, found chimney brick from the chimney. And then dig another hole, had the upstairs tiles that were upstairs in the old house. So it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, that you don't want the gift to come,
You don't want the gift.
but, and then, you know, on the other side of the coin, as you've heard my daughter say, you know, why put yourself through this by having this house? I said, because it helps me. I said, I can never vision somebody else living in this house. I know every nook and cranny of this house. I said, because all the woodwork, I sanded and stained, and urethaned. I said, and then when we bought the house from your grandfather, we took the whole upstairs apart and rebuilt the whole upstairs. I know every nook and cranny. I said, so, and she will attest. In one corner of that, it was actually the stuff that was in the north or the southeast corner, which was still there. And my father's tool, it was like a paint, he called it a paint cabinet. Back then, guys had paint cabinets for all the paints. And that went from house to house to house to cellar. And the storm hit, and that paint cabinet was still there. One drawer was ripped out of it. But the other drawer was there, and all the paint was there, and the doors were just flapping in the wind. But everything was still there. Why? You don't know. You just don't know. And those are the things that brain tease you on occasion. So when I retired that winter of 17, I actually took that apart. And I was like, I'm done with looking at this. Because my daughter said, what are you doing? I had 3 broken kitchen chairs from, so I took all 3 of them apart, made 1 chair. And now I got it upstairs in my bedroom. Why? Stupid? I don't know. It's weird. And she's like, what are you going to do with that? I said, I'm going to give it to you someday when you get married. That's the chair your father made. That's the oldest thing I own. You know, we didn't touch on the aspect of photos. And it's kind of stupid because of the fact that my daughter is a photographer. But people take for granted the photos they take. I had to rely on my grandmother and my other grandmother to try to piece together photos of my childhood, which are still very sparse. But all the things that you get upset that your parents saved, you know, like report cards and stuff like that. You know, I saved my first pay stub. I saved all my report cards. All that stuff's gone. You know, things that, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of things like that. Like I told you, you know, the stuff on the kitchen table. I had my class ring, and I had my gown, I think, too. I had to get another gown. They gave it to me. That was nice. But my class ring, I never replaced it. I figured, she took it with her. I had my father's mentality at that point. You know, she must have wanted it. But I never got another one. It's just, you just kind of grin and bear it. Move on.